In the Roaring Twenties, Al Capone ruled an empire of crime in the Windy City. Gambling, prostitution, bootlegging, bribery, narcotics trafficking, robbery, protection rackets, and murder. And it seemed that law enforcement couldn't touch him. The early Bureau would have been happy to join the fight to take Capone down, but we needed a federal crime to hang our case on and the evidence to back it up. Eventually, that day would come. Born of an immigrant family in Brooklyn, New York in January 1899, Capone's parents immigrated to the United States from Naples in 1893. Al, the fourth of 9 children, grew up in Brooklyn, New York. He attended school until the 6th grade, whence he dropped out at age 14 after striking a teacher. He worked a variety of odd jobs, as a candy store clerk, a bowling alley pinboy, a laborer in an ammunition plant, and a cutter in a bookbindery, all the while serving in the South Brooklyn Rippers and 40 Thieves Juniors, 2 kid gangs. That is, bands of delinquent children known for vandalism and petty crime that were common in New York at the time. Capone also became a member of the James Street Boys gang during this period, which was run by Johnny Torrio, a gentleman gangster who would become his lifelong mentor, and associated with the 5 Points gang. At age 16, Capone became a member of the 5 Points gang and served aspiring mobster Francesco Ioe, Torrio's associate, more commonly known as Frankie Yale, as a bartender in Yale's brothel saloon, the Harvard Inn. Before Capone turned 21, he was involved in several violent incidents. In a youthful scrape at the Harvard Inn, a young hoodlum named Frank Galluccio slashed Capone with a knife or razor across his left cheek after Capone made a crude comment to Galluccio's sister, prompting the later nickname Scarface. Capone later shot the winner of a neighborhood craps game to death as he robbed him of his winnings. Despite being questioned by the police, Capone was let go because no one had witnessed the murder. In another incident, Capone brutally assaulted a low-level member of the rival White Hand gang and left him for dead. Since White Hand gang leaders promised retribution, Yale sent Capone, his wife, and his young child to Chicago to work for Torrio. Torrio had moved from New York to Chicago in 1909 to help run the giant brothel business under Chicago crime boss Big Jim Colosimo. Shortly after Capone's arrival in the city in 1919, Colosimo was assassinated by either Yale or Capone himself in 1920 to make way for Torrio's rule. As Prohibition began, new bootlegging operations opened up and drew in immense wealth. In 1924, Capone was responsible for the murder of Joe Howard in retribution for Howard's earlier assault of one of Capone's friends. William McSwiggan, an aggressive prosecutor, attempted but failed to indict Capone when the eyewitnesses to the killing, fearing harm, lost their nerve and denied remembering the incident. Later that year, Torrio and Capone enlisted Yale and other associates to murder gang leader Dion O'Banion in his flower shop. O'Banion's associates Jaime Weiss and George "Bugs" Moran were unsuccessful in their attempt to kill Torrio in early 1925. After a stint in prison, Torrio retired to Italy, and Capone became crime czar of Chicago, running gambling, prostitution, and bootlegging rackets and expanding his territories by gunning down rivals and rival gangs. In 1926, Capone went into hiding for 3 months after he and some of his gunmen inadvertently killed McSwiggan while attacking other rivals. That evening, McSwiggan had been out drinking with 2 childhood friends who were also beer runners and other criminals when he was gunned down in the street. Again, Capone went unpunished. Capone's wealth in 1927 was estimated at close to $100 million. The most notorious of the bloodlettings was the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, in which 7 members of Bugs Moran's gang were machine-gunned in a garage on Chicago's North Side on February 14, 1929. Also in 1929, Capone was arrested outside a Philadelphia theater for possessing a concealed handgun, and within days was sentenced to 1 year in prison. After death threats from fellow inmates at Holmesburg County Prison, he was transferred to Philadelphia's Eastern State Penitentiary, where he served some 8 months before being released early for good behavior in 1930. Many Americans were fascinated by the larger-than-life image of Capone. Indeed, the motion picture Scarface, The Shame of a Nation, 1932, directed by Howard Hawks, starred Paul Muni in the role of a gangster loosely based on Capone, who reputedly obtained a copy of the film for private screenings. On June 5, 1931, Capone was indicted for 22 counts of federal income tax evasion for the years 1925 through 1929. On June 12, Capone and others were charged with conspiracy to violate Prohibition laws for the years 1922 to 1931. In October, Capone was tried, found guilty on 3 of the 23 counts, and sentenced to 11 years in prison and $50,000 in fines and court costs. He entered Atlanta Penitentiary in May 1932, but was transferred to the new Alcatraz prison in August 1934. In November 1939, Al Capone was released after having served 7 years, 6 months, and 15 days, and having paid all fines and back taxes. Suffering from paresis derived from syphilis, he had deteriorated greatly during his confinement. Immediately on release, he entered a Baltimore hospital for brain treatment and then went on to his Florida home, an estate on Palm Island in Biscayne Bay near Miami, which he had purchased in 1928. Following his release, he never publicly returned to Chicago. He had become mentally incapable of returning to gangland politics. In 1946, his physician and a Baltimore psychiatrist, after examination, both concluded Capone then had the mentality of a 12-year-old child. Capone resided on Palm Island with his wife and immediate family in a secluded atmosphere until his death due to a stroke and pneumonia on January 25, 1947.